Hey everybody, welcome back to my channel. My name is Stephanie Bree, and so I'm finally doing my top 25 Super Nintendo Entertainment System games of all time. Now, I had a Super NES as a kid. I also had a Sega Genesis and an NES as a kid, and an N64 and a PlayStation 1, and an Atari 2600. Those are all the game consoles I owned as a kid. So, let's go ahead and jump in. Number 25 on this list is an arcade favorite of mine. Yes, I do prefer the arcade version, as is often the case in these games, but the Super Nintendo version is quite good and fairly faithful, all things considered. This is Super Smash TV. Now, it's pretty much a top-down shooter, kind of like Contra, or at least the top-down levels in Contra, I guess. More like Ikari Warriors, I suppose, but not exactly exact, but it's close enough. All right, number 24 is Cool Spot. This is a 2D platformer that was probably on my Genesis list, if I'm not mistaken, and it's a fine fucking game, just as good on the Super Nintendo as the Sega Genesis. Number 23, Super Ghouls and Ghosts. I always thought it was Super Ghosts and Goblins, so I don't know. I just looked up Wikipedia, and I don't know if I trust it, but there it is. Super Ghouls and Ghosts, I guess. Anyways, it's a fine fucking game. Just as good as the Genesis game. It's not the exact same game, but it's just as fucking good. Number 22 is another arcade game. This is Mortal Kombat 3, but specifically Mortal Kombat 3, not Ultimate Mortal Kombat 3, because that one just wasn't as good. The the Super NES, goddamn, I'm going to say that a lot, was really showing its age by the time Ultimate Mortal Kombat 3 came out. So that version isn't as good as the one that came out, the year prior. So, next up is not an arcade game. As far as I can tell, this game is a Super Nintendo exclusive, which might be the first Super Nintendo exclusive on my list so far. This is Super Bomberman. This was not the first Bomberman game, and this was not the first multiplayer Bomberman game. And it isn't the best Bomberman or multiplayer Bomberman either, but it's still a damn good game. Number 20 is another arcade game. This is actually a side-scrolling beat-em-up. It is Knights of the Round. So it's kind of like a fantasy-themed game, kind of like Golden Axe on the Sega, but still pretty damn good. Number 19 is an arcade fighting game. It is Samurai Showdown. Again, this was probably on my Sega list, but it is what it is. Number 18 is also an arcade game, but it's also kind of sort of a Nintendo game. It is a Super Nintendo exclusive, technically. It is Killer Instinct. Or at least it was back in the day. I don't know if it's been reissued or not, but whatever. Alright. Pretty fun fucking 3D, pseudo 3D fighting game. Number 17 is two games in one. It is Tetris / Dr. Mario. And this one's pretty cool because it actually has a mashup remix mode, which lets you play a little bit of both, which is pretty fucking fun. Number 16 is another arcade fighting game. This is Super Street Fighter 2. Pretty good game on the Super Nintendo, all things considered. Number 15 is not, I don't think, a Super Nintendo exclusive necessarily. I think it was on the Genesis, but I think the Genesis game is slightly different, if I'm not mistaken. Anyways, this is Contra 3, The Alien Wars. This is a great fucking game on the Super Nintendo. Number 14 on, we're almost to the point where it's going to be just Nintendo published titles, but not exclusively. But Number 14 is Super Mario All Stars, which takes the four 8-bit NES Super Mario games and beefs them up with prettier 16-bit graphics, 16-bit sound, uh, customizable controls, and save states, which is pretty fucking cool for back in the day. Number 13 is Super Castlevania 4. I go back and forth on if this is the best Castlevania or a Symphony of the Night is the best Castlevania. But either way, this is absolutely the best one on the Super Nintendo, and it's a pretty fucking good game. Number 12 is another arcade fighting game, but we're almost through. We've only got 2 more to go. This is Primal Rage. Look, if you've watched any of my top list videos, you know I love Primal Rage. It's one of my favorite fucking games of all time. So it's always going to make the list. And the Super Nintendo port is just as good as the Genesis port, and they're both just as good as the arcade. Not 100% faithful, but they're at least 85% faithful, and that's fucking good enough, people. It really fucking is. Number 11 is the last arcade fighting game on this list, and the best arcade fighting game on the Super Nintendo. Probably the best 2D arcade fighting game, I have to throw that asterisk out there, of all time, but I'm not ready to make that statement just yet. But it is what it is. It's Mortal Kombat 2. It's the best Mortal Kombat on the Super Nintendo. The first one is rubbish. Good game. Terrible port. Number 10. We're into the top 10 here. And I'm going to go ahead and spoil the list. I am an arcade nut. And I love action games. So you're not going to see the typical top 10 games on my list that you see on most Super Nintendo top 10 lists. I'm going to go ahead and tell you that right now. These are mostly, all but 1 or 2 actually, Nintendo first party published titles. All but maybe 2, maybe 3. And I do believe they were, at least at the time, console exclusives to the Super Nintendo, obviously. But let's get on with the top 10. Number 10 is Super Mario Kart. It's the game that launched the ongoing franchise. Damn good game in the franchise. Nothing to complain about. Number 9, Super Star Wars. The only good Star Wars game on the Super Nintendo. The other 2 just kind of fall short. But it's a damn good game. It's a good side-scrolling action platformer / shoot-em-up, kind of, sort of, almost, but not really. Maybe side-scrolling shooter? Run and gun? I don't know. Whatever. It's a good fucking game. Number 8, SimCity. Now, I initially had this at number 2. However, as I was reading the list, there was an oversight. I left the true number 2 off the list, and I was like, oh, if I leave this game off the list, I'm going to get roasted. So I put SimCity at number 8 because I had to make room for the actual number 2, which we'll get there. But this version of SimCity is not only my favorite version of SimCity out of all of them, SimCity Classic, SimCity 4, SimCity 2000, 3000, etc. This is the only one I'll play to this day. It's the only one I'll replay. Number 7 is Mega Man X. So, I'm going to cut to the chase. This is the only Mega Man game I like. That's it. Mega Man X is not only the best Mega Man game, and also subsequently the best on the Super Nintendo, and also subsequently the only one I like, it's still a damn fucking good game. This didn't have to be a part of a franchise. It could just stand on its own and fucking rocks. Number 6 is Kirby Super Star. This is actually 6 games in one, technically, even though 2 of them are actually just mini games. It still counts. But this is 4 complete games in one, plus 2 mini games. So a pretty fucking good game. And those are all rock solid games, especially the one with the caves. A pretty fucking good game. Number 5 is Super Mario RPG. I'm not going to say I almost didn't put this on the list because that's not true. I almost put it a little lower on the list, like not even the top 10. But as I was shuffling things around, I realized, nah, this is number 5. This belongs in the number 5 spot. Super Mario RPG is probably the second greatest role-playing game, or at least video game ever. And probably the second greatest JRPG video game ever. We'll get to the greatest a little bit down the road when we talk about it. But it is a great fucking game. And one of the few JRPGs I've actually beat. One of the few. Not the only one, but one of the few. Number 4 is motherfucking Donkey Kong Country. Just the first one. The other two, oh my god, they suck. They suck so much. I hate them. Alright, number 3 is Super Metroid. And again, one of the few games I have beat. Not my favorite of all the Metroids, but my favorite of all the 2D Metroids, if that tells you anything. Still a pretty fucking rock solid game. I have beat it. I did 100% it. It was fucking hard as shit, but I'm proud that I did. Here's the real number 2. You're probably, dying of anticipation to figure out what number 1 is. Number 2 is Legend of Zelda: A Link to the Past. 1, the best fantasy top-down RPG type game on the Super Nintendo. 2, the literal greatest Zelda game of all time, not just 2D, but of all time. And 3, almost the greatest game on the Super Nintendo. There's only one game that tops it. And if you've been paying any attention, you can already guess what it ain't. Because it ain't any of those JRPGs. It's not. Number 1 is not. It's not the one that I did a short on that you already know I don't like. It's not the game in the long running franchise where they all have different numbers but they're not connected at all. Nope. Number 1, greatest Super Nintendo game, greatest Mario game, greatest 2D platformer of all time, and probably greatest video game ever made, Super Mario World. Abso-fucking-lutely. Oh my god, I fucking love Super Mario World. This is a game I literally beat 10 to 12 times a year. I play this game all the fucking time. This is the game we all bought a Super Nintendo to play. This is the game that sold us on the Super Nintendo. And if this isn't your number 1 favorite Super Nintendo game, I don't know what's wrong with you. I mean, I guess, but whatever.